Greetings and welcome to Garage Grub. It's where a Florida man cooks, I think, some really good food in his garage. So pull up that plastic chair, maybe pop a cold one if you'd like, and enjoy the show. I think this episode is a really good one.
Now this piece of dough was one, it was sitting in the fridge for a couple days. I just pulled it out. I put it in a little, bowl, paper bowl. And what it's doing now in the lexicon of baking is proofing. And proofing means the dough is just warming up, so the sleeping yeast is awakened by the warmth, and it'll start to get puffy and puffy. So I'm going to cover this, and I'll come back in about an hour, and it should be almost filling the bowl. And then you are ready to do whatever you want with it. I don't know why you do that. I don't know why you proof. I have no idea. I'm not a baker. But all I know is that it's going to get puffier. And I don't know, maybe that makes it fluffier, lighter. I'm not really sure. But in any event, I do know that you don't want to overwork the dough. That's what the bakers say. Oh, you don't want to overwork the dough. So this way, when it puffs up, I'm just going to make it into a small loaf, and we're going to throw it in the oven and bake some fresh bread. That's it. With a rag, and I know this looks like a dirty, filthy rag. It's a shop rag. Yeah, this is a garage. I cook in the garage, so you have a rag in the garage. But this is clean. It's stained by oil, of course, and grease, but it's clean. It's been in the machine. It's washed out in the wash machine, so it's not like I'm putting a dirty, oily rag on top of the dough. Just so you know.
Okay, I had a problem. When I set my camera up, I hit a time lapse, and so it went into some hyper speed recording, so you couldn't tell what I was doing, and you couldn't hear me because there was no audio. So what I'm gonna tell you what I just did to get this to that beautiful little pre-baked loaf. I pulled it out of the cup, stretched it into a little oblong kind of shape, put it down. I took my box cutter and I scored the top. Not a lot, but just gave it a little separation there. And then that's sharp, you watch that thing. Then I gave it one shot with a canola oil, which, as I pointed out, is not cannoli oil, because a cannoli is an Italian pastry. Very different. And then I just sprinkled some sesame seeds on. Obviously got some on the loaf, most seem to be in the pan. But anyway, the oven's at 400, preheating. Very important, preheat the oven, your toaster oven. And I'm gonna put it in for about 12 minutes and then check it. But as soon as it puffs up and it's golden brown, should be about done. Then we get to slice it, warm red slices and a little butter. Oh, I'm telling you, it's going to be good. So a few fans of mine have asked me where I learned to cook. Very few, by the way. And it's obvious that I didn't attend some kind of culinary arts academy. No, but I did learn, I think, from some pretty good chefs or cooks in the city of San Francisco, where I lived for a while. You see, I went through a transition in my life, like a lot of people, and I had to live in an apartment in the city. It was a very small apartment. It was kind of like a dorm room, so I called it the shanty. And it was a temporary thing, and it worked okay for a while. The good news is that it was right down the hill. I could walk to kind of the Italian section, and there were all kinds of restaurants, and I was in a place in my career where I was traveling a lot. So I tried cooking in the shanty, but inevitably I'd end up with all this food. It would just rot. I come back and have mold on it. It just didn't work. It was a disaster. So I ended up, when I was in town, going down the street to the Italian section and to the Italian restaurants. Now again, I was financially constrained, so I didn't go out to dinner every night. What I would usually do is go down, and while I had a glass of wine, I'd sit at the bar or the counter area overlooking the kitchen, and I'd watch the guys or gals, did we say gals? Anyway, the women cook. And that's where I kind of figured out that it really comes down to a handful of things. And to me, as you know, based on garage grubbing and our goal of simplicity in all things, you realize that I boiled it down to the fundamental elements that I think you need to cook anything. And to me, it's heat and moisture and prep. And I can't tell you how many meals I watch these cooks make where that's all they were doing, because they weren't cooking at night, they were prepping all day long, and at night what they were really doing was assembling. Now they were assembling in a certain way so that the food came out great, and it did, but when you really boiled it down, it was heat and moisture and prep. So that's kind of what we do in the garage. My favorite dish at this one restaurant, which unfortunately is no longer there, was called chicken under a brick. And it really was. They'd take a quarter chicken, the leg and the thigh. I'm sure they marinated it. I'm sure they rubbed it, and patted it with olive oil and some seasonings. And they had a big hot brick. It always sat on the grill, and it was always about 800 degrees, I'm sure. And they would take that chicken, they'd slap it on the grill, and they'd put the brick on top. Guy had a rag, and he'd grab it and drop it a very short period of time, probably 5 to 7 minutes. He lifted the brick, he flipped it, he threw the brick back down. And I had that a few times, and I'm telling you, it was so beautiful. It was charred, it was moist, it was tender. I mean, that was, to me, the epitome of that magic combination of heat and moisture. So here we have our small loaf, and it looks pretty nice and golden brown. It took about 18 minutes, but again, that's all dependent on your device, your ambient temperature in your garage, and all that stuff. So you got to keep an eye on it, but we'll let it rest here and cool off a little bit, and then we'll slice off a chunk, slather it with some butter, and see how we did. Okay, so let's slice off a chunk and see how we're doing here. It's still hot. Oh. And I've got a butter knife here. There's a story to this knife. Believe it or not, it's imprinted with Japan. And I know you can't buy a knife like this anymore. Wouldn't say Japan, it would say some other country. But this knife has traveled a long way, as my dear spouse used to work in the Federal Reserve building in San Francisco. Let's just say a while back. And that was back when you went to lunch, at lunch, when you worked. So she would go down with her colleagues to the cafeteria in the Federal Reserve building in San Francisco, and they would have lunch. Now, the story as to how this ended up in her purse and is with us today and in use in the garage is yet to be told. But in any event, we're going to use this knife, and we're going to grab a little bit of butter here, and we're going to see if this bread came out any good. That's not enough butter. We need a little more. Oh yeah, that's better. I mean, butter is good. Butter is good. Ready? Wow. Oh yeah. Oh daddy. That's beautiful. So we came out in the garage, put some dough together, played around with it, put in a little toaster oven, and right now we have a beautiful snack. How fun is that? Ah, it's beautiful. I'm gonna have another bite. coffee's going. I wonder what I've gotten myself into this time. I'll be back.